Hey everybody, Scott here with Aviation 326, scenario number 2. We're going to go over this scenario as if we're talking to a DPE. And the scenario is flying a radio station DJ around the city covering traffic. So some of the elements that we're going to go over are going to be route, trip, pilot, aircraft, environment, and some external pressures as well. But the knowns and unknowns of this scenario, first and foremost, we're not really sure about how much time we have to prepare. We're not sure about the pilot in the situation, and we're not sure about what kind of airspace we're going to be in. So I'll just assume that it's my local city of Atlanta, and it's myself. So for this scenario, the route that we're going to be talking about, I think the most important thing would be communicating with ATC. Obviously, to transition the Bravo airspace, you need to talk with them. And it also just brings some additional safety to let somebody else be looking for you on the radar, watching out for you. It's very helpful. Something I might also do would be, based on their workload at the time of your flight, I would ask them if they would like for me to make more timed interval position reports. The reason being, with this kind of flight, we're going to be making some very unusual patterns and uncharacteristic flight paths. So may not be what they're expecting an aircraft to do in the Bravo airspace. So communicating with them would be very helpful. The trip, as far as the trip goes, it all depends on where the accident is and how to get there. I would expect a lot of low circling flights, kind of low approach style flights. I would definitely make sure I'm studying the VFR charts for towers, obstructions, minimum altitudes. Knowing how low you can fly before you get there is extremely important. So I would definitely do that beforehand. For the pilot, based on the scenario we're given, we don't really have the necessary information to make an informed decision about the pilot. We know that the pilot's commercially rated. That's about it. We don't know much else. So if it was me, I'd definitely make sure I would go through the I'm safe checklist. And if there are more than one items on that checklist that I would consider marginal, I'd cancel the flight and not go. It's just something that I would automatically do no matter what the flight is. Aircraft. Assuming that the individual in this scenario is me, I would definitely utilize my flight school's aircraft. I know they're maintained well, and I know I'm familiar with all aircraft in the fleet. So I'm not going to be confused about the avionics. I'm not going to be confused about how the aircraft is performing. If the flight's not in an aircraft that I'm familiar with, I'd probably just turn down the opportunity, honestly. Legal and proficient are not the same thing. So yeah, I would just say no. Another very important point here is the fuel on board. I would like to make sure I have fuel on board in flight time, and then build in a huge amount of reserves for myself, simply because the flight's flying at a high fuel burn rate. So you're doing those high fuel burn maneuvers at a low altitude, high RPMs. You're not going to have a very consistent fuel burn. You're never going to cruise off and get into cruise power for efficiency. So I think what I would do, well, I know what I would do is I would land with at least 1 hour of fuel time remaining, just because the fuel burn's inconsistent and it'd be very difficult to track how much fuel in time you have left. That's just my personal opinion on that one. Environment, flying low, making the low approach passes oftentimes leads to situations of spatial disorientation, definitely keep that in mind as I'm preparing for the flight if I do end up going. I think an overlap here for the environment is the external pressures. It would be extremely beneficial to be clear on the lowest altitude that you're willing to fly for this coverage. I think just going over the scenario, it would be tempting to be pressured into flying lower and lower and lower than you're willing to go. But if you're clear ahead of time about the lowest altitude you'll fly, once you get to where the accident is, there's no miscommunication and expectations are met before you even take off. So that's something that you're able to be firm in the air because you already discussed it on the ground. That kind of leads us into the external pressures. The finances could be an external pressure, making a few dollars, getting your foot in the door of a future employment possibility. It could lead you to trying to complete the task in the flight when you probably shouldn't, or you're not prepared enough for it. This situation could lead you to fall into the trap of trying to prove the right stuff to someone. But just because a friend got an opportunity for jet time and you need a few extra dollars, it doesn't mean that you need to put yourself into an unnecessary risk or into harm's way for that. You always got the option to stay on the ground. Doesn't matter what anyone says. They're not going to force you to fly. Popular saying goes, it's better to be on the ground wishing you were flying than flying and wishing you were on the ground. All right, that's about it. Thanks, guys. See ya.